Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you're having a wonderful day today. Today we're jumping into some malicious compliance. Our first story today comes to us from the freaking princess. We have to ask permission to schedule patients? Okay, let's jump right in. This is not my own malicious compliance, but if I were in the right department, I totally would have jumped on the bandwagon, and I have mad respect for the schedulers who I work with. So I work for a medical imaging facility. We have a scheduling department that has been under a lot of pressure in the past month or so to fill our schedules and get our numbers up so that we look better to corporate. In the midst of this happening, the hospitals in our area have put a pause on all elective surgeries as a result of the pandemic, but the management at my company has refused to acknowledge how that might affect us, and instead opted to put even more pressure on our schedulers and blame them when our schedules are not full. Also, I'd like to add that the metrics that they are using to grade the schedulers are dumb. Instead of requiring them to make a certain number of calls per hour, they are requiring them to schedule a minimum of 25 patients per day. You can make 60 calls a day, but if the patients you call don't pick up their phones, then too effing bad. They have also been on a tear about noting in the chart if a patient can't come in earlier than their scheduled appointment. For example, if a patient requests an appointment a week out, they are supposed to offer weekend and evening appointments, and if the patient still says no, it needs to be noted. One of our schedulers is literally referred to as a saint by everyone in our company. She is the sweetest woman I have ever met, and although I'm not a religious person, she is the ideal form of Christian. She is non-judgmental, thoughtful, genuine with everyone, and she really cares about all of our patients. We threw her a little birthday party a couple weeks ago, and she hand-wrote a thank you note and brought it in the next day. Most people just send an email, but she went the extra mile to express her gratitude. This saint has been under even more pressure than the rest of our schedulers because her numbers are consistently low. Never mind that the woman has worked for the company for 18 years and never makes a mistake. They are constantly publicly announcing that she scheduled fewer patients than anyone else the previous day. So this week, management sends out an urgent IM to all the schedulers basically saying, instead of noting in the chart that a patient can't come in, please ask permission from your manager before scheduling a patient further than 4 days out. We need to fill the schedules and hope this will help us reach our goals. Immediately, they get about 15 responses from every single scheduler, except the saint of course, saying that this is stupid and what the heck does management think they are going to do that the scheduler can't. But management ignores it. So our saint continues doing her job and almost immediately gets a patient who can't come in for a week. She sends an IM to that group chat so every single scheduler and manager on it can see. John Doe, MRN number 12345, patient states he cannot come in because he will be out of state for his job. Is it okay to schedule him for October 9th, the day after he returns? The first time, management just says sure, whatever, but then Saint does it 2 more times. Jane Smith, number, she has children in school and the first date she isn't tied up with their school activities is October 14th. Can I schedule her? Janice Cho, number, she can't drive anymore and her children aren't available to bring her in until October 8th. Can I schedule her? One of the other schedulers comes out from behind her cubicle and says, you know we can see those messages you're sending, right? Saint just grins. Finally, she sends her last message, the 4th patient within about an hour and a half, to which a manager finally responds, you don't need to message this chat with that information. The chat goes completely dead for a bit. About an hour later, the manager of the entire state sends out a message saying, after reevaluating, we have decided this is not effective. Please resume noting in the chart when patients cannot come in for 4 days or more. Saint came up to me near the end of the day, happier than I have seen her in weeks. They think I was doing that because I didn't know better, but I was doing it on purpose. We have to remember that she's been there for longer than pretty much everybody else I think in that scheduling department, so she knows all about operations and scheduling, more than any of the managers would, and that means she knew how to get under their skin and get the rules changed. Great work for her. Do me a quick favor, have a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're not actually subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. Our second story today comes to us from Zany Bays. You don't want me to serve you? No problem. Let's jump right in. So for a backstory, I work in a bakery in a medium-sized grocery store. Apart from baking and slicing and packaging breads, pies, and other pastries, I also have to clean all the dishes and clean my department floors when I work the closing shifts. A mid-shift worker also helps with the responsibilities until their shift ends, along with the department manager, who usually leaves a couple hours after my shift starts. A few weeks ago when I was working, I came from the back where we wash our dishes to help this lady, we'll call her B, who was standing near our counter by the bread slicer with an attitude. I'm assuming she was mad she had to wait because the mid-shift worker was busy with another customer. I came over and she tossed the bread on the counter and just said, "Slice this." Rough day, no problem. I just want to get her out of here, so politely say, "Yes, ma'am," and I grab a pair of gloves and start to put them on. "You're not going to wash your hands?" "Oh, no, ma'am. I already washed them before I came out here." "BS, I don't want you to touch my bread with those nasty hands." "I mean, I can wash them again if you want." "You know what? Don't bother." B then goes to another department and asks for our department manager, and then starts yelling at him in front of the bakery and other people, pointing at me saying I don't wash my hands and that I'm disgusting, and ends up calling me a cracker. How outdated. My manager tries to calm her down and ends up washing his hands and cutting her bread to make her leave. I explain the situation to my manager, and he basically says next time, just wash my hands by one of our sinks next to our front counter, but if she comes back and tries causing a scene again, to let him know, and he will tell her to leave. After talking to the store manager, he also told me the same thing. Fast forward to yesterday, B comes back later towards closing time, where both the mid-shift and department manager are both gone. So I'm the only one working in the bakery. She's holding bread to be sliced again, and hasn't noticed it's me when she asked me to slice her bread. Until I reach out my hand to get the bread, she stops and says, "No, you're not helping me," with a rude look on her face. I immediately smile and say, "No worries, have a nice night," and I walk to help another lady, and then walked in the back to clean dishes. A few minutes later, I hear yelling, "Excuse me." So I walk back up and, "Yes, ma'am." She gives me another rude look and says, "Is no one going to help me?" "No, ma'am, I'm the only one in the bakery." "Then wash your effing hands and slice my bread." "No, ma'am, I'm not serving you. I'm sorry. Have a nice night." "You are slicing my effing bread. You have to." "No, ma'am, you told me not to serve you. Have a nice night." And I walked into the back to clean more dishes. B ends up throwing her bread on the ground, and my store manager comes and tells her she needs to leave for causing a scene, and threatens to call the police if she doesn't leave. So B leaves, but not without more screaming and name-calling, but she leaves. I tell my store manager what happened, and he told me I should have handled it better, and that I instigated her to get angry, and to get a hold of him if that ever happens again. Whatever, it felt great. With people like that, you just have to show them the rope and they'll likely do the rest. One thing to remember though is that we always have a right to refuse service, especially if somebody's insulting or being demeaning or stalking or acting aggressively towards you. One thing I would do in this situation though is I would try to cover my butt. I would whip out my phone and record this person so that I had a little bit of evidence to use against them when they go to the manager and say that I was the one being the butthole. Because then you can prove that no, you were the one being the butthole and you're not allowed to come here anymore. Our next story today comes to us from Brother P. So you create a bogus account in my name and refuse to cancel until I pay the account? Okay, sounds like a good plan. Let's jump right in. My school was getting some work done on the HVAC system, and the contractor, hired by the district not the school, needed some parts to complete the job. The parts vendor arranged to ship the parts to the school, and I was asked to meet the courier truck, not naming names, but it rhymes with Dead Rex, after hours, and put the parts where the contractor would get them the next day. The parts came, the contractor made the fix, the HVAC worked, and all was well. A month later, a bill came from the courier service in the misspelled name of the school. It cited remote access fee of $195 and liftgate fee of $180. Add tax and the invoice totaled over $400. I passed the bill onto our facilities department with instructions to pass it on to the contractor. They did it, it was off my plate, and all was well. A month later, a bill came from the courier service in the misspelled name of the school. It cited remote access fee of $195, a liftgate fee of $180, a late payment charge of $30, add tax, and the invoice totaled over $430. I passed the bill onto our accounting department, CC'd the facilities department, and asked them to deal with it, and all was well. A month later, a bill came from the courier service. This went on for 6 months. Facilities didn't want to deal with it. Accounting didn't want to deal with it. The solution was for me to call and try and get the bill canceled. Gritting my teeth, I called their billing department and spent the next 10 minutes arguing with a thoroughly unpleasant collections guy. He explained that due to the difficulty with the delivery location, they opened an account in our name and issued the bill. He grew increasingly belligerent and insisted I pay or he would send it to collections. Despite this being a meaningless threat, I agreed and hung up. I went to my secretary and asked her for a check in the amount of the most recent invoice. I then asked her to open an account in the name of the courier service and created an account disputation fee in the amount of $400 and a telephone argument fee in the amount of $600 and referenced the account number on their invoice. I sent the check to their collections department and the invoice to their accounts payable department, and all was well. A month later, a letter came from their courier service. They canceled the invoice. This is an interesting situation because I think if they'd let it go to court, the judge probably would have thrown it out just because of the misspelling of the school's name. It sounds to me like the courier company was just trying to get extra money, and they knew that it was a school and figured that it was a small amount so it would just get paid. I'm sure this has worked for them at many other locations, but apparently at this one, they actually look at their numbers. Our next story today comes to us from Sudden Pineapple 821. The time my buddy left a loaded semi-truck halfway across the country. Let's jump right in. This is not my story, but I thought it's worthy to share. For background, my buddy is now my husband's best friend. They met while overseas and have been best friends and roommates on and off basically until we bought our own home. They are basically brothers and quite the package deal. Anyway, I'll call my buddy Mac. Mac was an over-the-road trucker at the time that this happened and was working for an entry-level company. Those companies have their place since they help people acquire a CDL and the first year or two of experience so that other companies will be able to accept you. Insurance reasons mostly. Unfortunately, the downside to companies like these are as follows. 1. Inexperienced drivers. 2. Many of the instructors are also fairly inexperienced. 3. Pay is mediocre for industry standards. 4. The dispatchers often ask for unreasonable and undrivable tasks. Don't award home time very easily, and you're basically just a number. We generally put up with companies like this at first to get our feet wet and gain those precious miles and years to make us more hireable down the road, so to speak. Anyway, Mac had been driving for this company for approximately a year when he was at the time halfway across the country from his home base when he got a phone call. His best friend, my current husband, was in the hospital with a potentially fatal infection. Mac immediately called dispatch to inform them that he was making an immediate U-turn and heading straight home. Here's where the malicious compliance comes in. They told him that if he deviates from his route in any way, that he would be fired immediately. They didn't care that he might lose his best friend and told him to suck it up and do his job. He said, "Fine, I quit." He pulled over at the nearest truck stop, parked the truck thousands of miles from his home base, and left it. He cleaned it out and took a Greyhound home, if memory serves. His old company had to have his tractor and fully loaded trailer towed thousands of miles. Not only that, but they were late on the precious delivery of what was on his trailer. Let me tell you, nothing about that is cheap. Mac now works for a smaller family-owned company and is home daily or at least every weekend and is paid much better. Hope you enjoyed. This story always cracks me up. I'm gathering from the comments down below that this happens a lot more often than you might think. It's just like when I started with the towing company a while back, and I was really surprised at how many wheels just happened to fall off cars on a regular day. Well, apparently a lot of truck drivers just abandon their loads in the middle of nowhere. So apparently the trucking company just dispatches somebody from a local hub, and they drive it the rest of the way. Really, no harm, no foul. No tow trucks would be involved, and there really wouldn't be all that much money missed out on, unless they were really late for a delivery, but big companies have drivers all over the place, so they could get somebody into that truck fairly quickly. Our last story today comes to us from Up Above It All. Mom says no to everything? Try this one cool trick. Let's jump right in. I think this story counts as malicious compliance, though it is a bit of a flip on the usual version. This is a story from when I was 20 years old. I had been able to study abroad for a short time. Near what was to be the end of my stay abroad, 2 friends invited me to travel with them a few extra days before heading home. I could change my plane ticket, but I would need additional money from home to do this extra trip. I knew the money itself would not be the problem. It was my mother that would be. My mother was very, very controlling. Everything always had to be her way. I was to do everything she expected of me, and my own ideas were always wrong. Look up OCPD if you want more info. She has an idea in her head of how things should be, and then if they are not exactly as she thought, she needs to tell everyone what they are doing wrong. She had initially, predictably, freaked out about my idea to study abroad at all, as she could not accept something so outside her own ideas. "I've never ever been there," she'd yelled, but my dad talked her into it. I knew she'd now say no to my request to do further traveling to more unknown places and to me changing my date to return home. However, I really wanted to go. I thought about this problem for days, and then I knew. I also had a boyfriend back home, Mark, and my mom was not a fan. Mark was a good boyfriend to me, but didn't meet my mom's standards. So I told her that my friends were going on this amazing trip and I really wanted to go. But I was feeling very conflicted because Mark was saying that he had already missed me too much and he wanted me to come home as soon as school ended so we could be back together. I didn't mention the fact that I couldn't afford to go without my mom's approval. I just acted like going was something I was going to do, except I maybe wasn't because Mark was being very demanding about this. My mother was indignant. How dare Mark tell me what to do? That was very unthoughtful of him to try to cut short such a great experience for me to travel. A good boyfriend wouldn't do that, and it was his own problem if this makes him mad. She said I was to go on this trip, no matter what Mark said, and I could have the funds to cover those extra days. So, I complied. Well, Mom already doesn't like the boyfriend, so even if she confronted him later on, I'm sure OP would have given him a heads up, and he would have known how to handle the situation. OP, I really hope you enjoyed your extra trip, and I recommend to anybody if you get a chance to travel, once the whole pandemic's over that is, do it because we have an amazing Earth that we live on, and the more you can see of it, the better. Check out all 5 OPs linked in the description down below. I thank you for watching and I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.